correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the Democratic Party in general likes the idea of being in power, but never really knows what to do when they have it. All right, so the Democratic Party seems to be wanting to throw trans people under the bus. And they're not using language that specifically says that they are throwing trans people under the bus, but here, just look at this. This is from Politico, and I want you to tell me what you read from this, okay? Here. I'll show you, and you may see what I see. You may not see what I see. We'll see if we see eye to eye on this. Okay? So it says that moderate Democrats are on a tear. Democrats are overperforming at the state level, with centrist candidates flipping one seat and coming close in another in special elections in deep red parts of Iowa. Rahm Emanuel, who once orchestrated a takeover of the House by recruiting Blue Dog Democrats, is eyeing a 2028 bid for president. And leading Democrats like Gavin Newsom and Chuck Schumer are rebuffing the left. The California governor siding against trans players in women's sports, and the Senate minority leader veering away from progressive demands to shut down the government. Jonathan Cott says moderates are having their moment. The one-time senior advisor of the former centrist Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia said, I think people, or he was the advisor to Joe Manchin, said, I think people are realizing that there were many reasons we lost in 2024, but an acquiescence to all of the liberal groups and fighting and dying on hills. About 1 and 2 and 3% of the voting population seemed really dumb. Now, what group of people in the United States can be considered specifically 1, 2, or 3% of the population? Trans people. Yes, redheads, but what demands were redheads making during the election? There was no specific redhead demand to get their non-existent souls taken back from a governor. There was none of that. So what group makes up that small percentage of the populations and were apparently making a bunch of demands for liberal groups? And that really does just come down to trans people. That's just trans people. It says a fresh batch of public polling over the weekend showed the Democratic Party is facing its worst image crisis in some time. An NBC News poll showed more than half of independents have an unfavorable view of the party. Just 11% of independents have positive views of Democrats, which could explain why Democrats are pivoting to reach these voters. Even their own polling sees a move towards the center. In the party's latest internal survey in congressional battlegrounds, the vast majority of voters, 69%, says Democrats were too focused on being politically correct. What the fuck does that even mean? I'm just really curious. What does that actually mean? What is Democrats are too politically correct? Who the fuck has a problem with that? And if they do, can they articulate what that even means? Anyway, it says, while 51% said the party is elitist, I can agree with that, according to a poll conducted by the Democratic group Navigator Research. It says it's a reaction to what happened in the wake of the Trump victory in 2016, where the party did move pretty radically to the left on a whole bunch of things. And the country sort of did too, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, said Matt Bennett, a vice president of the Third Way, the centrist group that has called for a banning of far-left candidate questionnaires, pushed back against far-left staffers and groups that exert a disproportionate influence on policy and messaging, and own the failures of democratic governance in large cities. The progressive and activist wing of the party isn't rolling over. Populist champion Bernie Sanders is drawing large crowds in the Midwest. Liberal activists are organizing against massive budget cuts, and progressives are warning of a primary challenge to Schumer. But the revolution is happening in a quieter way for centrists. Far from Washington, there are signs that at the state level, that moderate Democrats are doing extremely well in districts that Trump captured only a few months ago. In an Iowa State House election last week, the Democratic candidate, though ultimately losing, outperformed Kamala Harris by 24 points. That performance by Democrat Nanette Griffin comes at the heels of the party flipping a state Senate seat in Iowa and solidifying legislative majorities in Virginia. And it bolstered centrists' argument that Democrats in the Trump era can motivate voters with meat and potatoes messaging about everyday costs. So here's the thing. I actually agree with that. But I do not think that meat and potatoes messaging about everyday concerns for regular Americans should come at the cost of trans people. I don't think that should come at the cost of trans people. That's fucking stupid. You can capitulate to the demands of 1% of the voting populace that needs to fucking survive while also doing what you can for the average everyday American. Serving both of those groups is your job as a politician. I just have to wonder, if we become a country that just throws trans people under the bus all the fucking time, what does that say about us? How useless does that make us as a country? The Iowa results build on Democrats' string of successes in state legislative special elections this year, which the party is pointing to as a measure of youth enthusiasm ahead of the midterms. What I am noticing is just a rejuvenation within the Democrats across the state, said Senator Mike Zimmer, who picked up a GOP seat in rural eastern Iowa in January that Trump won by 21 points. If we work hard and we really come together and we have an organized plan, we can be much more competitive. And it isn't just Iowa. Democrats are seizing on federal job losses as an issue in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania special elections slated for the end of March too, where they are pressing more economic than ideological message. Okay, so they are trying to play to what most Americans who are trying to figure out where their next meal is coming from, they're trying to play for that, because most Americans are having trouble worrying about trans people's issues when they can't figure out where their next meal is going to come from. I can understand that. But again, I don't think that the language that you should be using is one where you throw them under the fucking bus, where you're like, we shouldn't have capitulated to the demands of the 1%. Shut the fuck up. We capitulate to the demands of 1% of the population all the goddamn time. The fucking billionaires make up 1%, less than 1% of the population, and one of them is getting his way fucking everywhere. Oh, and then I see that Sakura said that in the chat. Right after I said that. Or right before I said that. Timings are weird. Malone called Zimmer the day after his victory to learn his playbook and has adopted similar economic messaging in his own campaign. As chaos reigns in Washington, Democrats have meaningful and winnable opportunities to push back on the MAGA agenda through state legislative special elections. And that was said by Heather Williams, president of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which is focused on electing Democrats to slate legislatures. The political implications for Schumer or Newsom are far from clear, as the results of a handful of special elections hardly foretell a Democratic comeback in Iowa. Democrats have historically done well before in the part of the state with a dense population of blue-collar workers, and Republicans maintain a tight grip on power in Iowa. These special elections can be not always the harbinger or the canary in the coal mine that folks want them to be, said GOP strategist Tyler Campbell. Still, Democrats are flexing their muscles, convinced that an economic message and the use of Elon Musk's slash and burn approach to cutting government as a cudgel can lift the party across the map. Iowa State Rep. J.D. Schulten says it's the energy factor. Our side is very energized because we're irate with what's happening. We're seeing this as a national trend. People are fed up and disgusted with what they're seeing out in D.C., and they're trying to do something about it. In Washington, Schumer has shifted to the left since the years when he described himself as an angry centrist, and the criticism of him from within the party was not limited to progressives. But his vote last week was a repudiation of the protest politics of the party's activist class. He says we have to reckon with the fact that young people, working class people, and people of color, the backbone of the Democratic Party, are moving away from the party, said Stevie O'Hanlon, political director of the Sunrise Movement. O'Hanlon said, I think Chuck Schumer is part of that reason. But for some in the party, provoking the left may be the point. In challenging party orthodoxy on trans rights, Newsom joined Emanuel in taking to the center, saying he was done with the discussion of locker rooms and done with the discussion of bathrooms, and wanted instead to have a conversation about the classroom. All of this is in line with the kind of cultural war retrenchment for which the party's most pragmatic voices are practically pleading. See here. Sakura says, because the bloody party is running to radical centrism. Yeah. So there was an enormous shift in the culture and in our politics, and some that was very good, and some of it went too far, Third Ways Bennett said. And I think we saw that in 2024, voters saying, whoa, we don't think that the shift the Democratic Party has taken was calibrated correctly. It went too far on a whole bunch of things. Fuck off on the too far on a whole bunch of things. What things did they go too far on? Trans rights? My argument is the Democratic Party is fucking weak-willed and doesn't actually go far enough. And you know what? This is an example of that. This right here is an example of that. This is Democrats going, oh, well, Donald Trump won. I guess we need to go further to the center. He's pushed that Overton window there. Fucking hell. The Democratic Party. God, this is another thing. This is another thing. Again, there's a person whom I have a lot of respect for that refuses to accept the idea that Bernie Sanders was kneecapped by the Democratic Party. And I'm going to be honest, this feels like more evidence in the bucket to me that Bernie Sanders will always be, and not Bernie Sanders specifically, he's too old to run for president now. But people like Bernie Sanders will always be kneecapped by the Democratic Party if we do not do something about that. We can't let the Democratic Party shift into the middle. Yes, there will be more Democrats in power, but what will they do with that power if they're not actually going to do things like enshrine trans rights? Sakura says, yes, too far by not going to Medicare for all, which the majority supports, and by not going to the federal cannabis legalization, which also enjoys majority support. Yeah. I'm sorry. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the Democratic Party in general likes the idea of being in power, but never fucking knows what to do when they have it. Sombrina says AOC is over 35. I believe she is now. Like, she was 34 very recently. Storm says, I was scared this was going to happen just like Labour in the UK. Yeah, Labour's doing the same shit. I'm not as familiar with what Labour's doing, but I hear from friends across the pond that they're not super keen on what Labour's doing over there either. Jesus. See you, Zeffy. I know, this shit frustrates me. Just having more and more evidence that our Democrats are just gonna fold gets me more than a little upset, you know? Just not really here for it. Storm says they want to be diet Republicans so they can keep getting donors' money without trying. You remember when Harris kept on having emails sent out? Guys, the fight's not over. Send me $5. After the fight was over and the $5 wasn't going to do anything. This is that stuff. Anyway, there is something we can do about this kind of shit. There is 100% something we can do about this kind of shit. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. When you see shit like this happening and you're not happy with it, you threaten your Democrats. And you know how you threaten your Democrats? You let them know that you vote in the primaries. That's so cool that you want to just trample on trans rights in order to keep your seat with your little bit of power. That's so cool and cute and quirky. Me and my family and my friends and all the people I hang out with, all of us vote in the primaries. And we have a whole lot of power over whether or not you keep your job. That's a thing you can do over on 5 calls. Yeah, usually I send this little shout out here to say, get angry at your Republican senators and your Republican House representatives. But right now, it's looking like it may be a good idea to do this to your Democrats as well, so that they know the problem isn't that they need to be a little further to the center. The problem is they need to be actually on board with incredibly popular policies that are coming from the left. The problem is not abandoning the people you should be protecting. The problem is you pretending that abandoning those people will allow you to consolidate power. Also, you can go with the further left Democrats by going with the Democrat Socialists of America. Find a chapter that is organizing near you. There's a link in the description. And see what you can do about getting somebody who can be put up as a candidate who can primary your local limp-dicked Democrat. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't subscribed already. What? That didn't come out already. Hit the like button and subscribe. That one. Anyway, insert into video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full-time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Lil Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.